Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on managing priorities. My name is Jason Michael, and I'm part of the talent management and training team for the Americas. And I'm joined today by Colin Murphy. Colin is part of the compensations and benefits team, and we both will be here to present to you the webinar, and Colin will be taking in your questions throughout. So just before we start, I want to let you know that the duration of the webinar is going to be between 30 and 45 minutes, depending on how many questions we receive. We will be pausing throughout the webinar to take in any questions you have. So to do that, on your right-hand side of your screen, you have a toolbox. So you want to use the questions box to submit your questions. And there will be an exercise throughout the webinar. So also you can use the chat box to submit your responses. Colin, are you ready?
All set.
All right. So I want to start first by telling you guys a story to illustrate what we mean by managing priorities and how to begin that discussion. And the story comes from Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey, for those of you who don't know, is an educator, an author, a businessman, and a keynote speaker. He's known for his popular book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is a great book if that's something that's interesting for anyone. So the story goes like this. A philosophy professor stood in front of his class, and had some items laid out in front of him. When the class began, he wordlessly picked up a large empty mason jar and started to fill it with rocks. Pretty big rocks, like the ones you see on the screen. Then he asked his students if the jar was full. They agreed that it was. So then the professor picked up a box of pebbles and poured them into the jar. He shook the jar a little bit. The pebbles, of course, rolled into the open areas between the rocks. He then asked the students again if the jar was full. And again, they agreed that it was. The professor then picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. Of course, the sand filled up everything else. So now the professor said, I want you to recognize that this is your life. The rocks are the important things, your family, your partner, your health, your children, things that if everything else were lost and only they remained, your life will still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job, your house, your car, and the sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand into the jar first, there's no room for the pebbles or for the rocks. The same thing goes for your life. If you spend all of your time and energy on the small stuff, you will never have room for the things that are important to you. So pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Throughout this webinar, we will have opportunities to start thinking and brainstorming about what are the big rocks in our lives. So take care of the rocks first, the things that really matter, set your priorities, and then the rest is just sand. So I really like the story to start illustrating, but also reflecting on how are we filling our lives? Are we prioritizing things that are small, like the sand, the pebbles, or are we really able to manage our priorities right? So in this webinar, we're going to discuss what is time management. We're going to learn to set priorities, and we're going to spend some time using Stephen Covey's time management matrix. And then you will receive tips and tricks on how to control interruptions and overcome procrastination. I do want to emphasize that this webinar is pretty short. It's between 30 and 45 minutes, so it's going to be a very high-level view of time management. At the end of the webinar, I will provide you resources for online courses about time management and different topics around time management, which I think are pretty interesting. So if we look at the word time management and we look at each word separately, time is the thing that we cannot change, ever. As much as we pray to slow down time or pray that time goes faster, unfortunately, that's not something that's within our control. Management, this you can control. So you can take an active role in choosing how you spend your time through decision-making, setting goals, monitoring them, taking action. So the term time management is a false term. It's really self-management. How do you manage yourself in the time that you have? So some benefits of time management are increasing in efficiency, which leads to success, whether it's business success, project success, personal success, leads to good reputation, which then gives you more and more opportunities. You'll also be able to have time for yourself to do the things that you enjoy, and therefore reducing your stress. So as you see, a lot of benefits in knowing how to better manage ourselves in the time that we have. So as mentioned earlier, we're going to spend a good portion of the webinar today to review the Stephen Covey's time management matrix. And it goes as follows. So as you see here in the matrix, the two main criteria on which you evaluate tasks are urgency and importance. So urgent activities, these are things that require your immediate attention. Importance are the ones that contribute to your mission, your values, and your goals. So if we look at each quadrant separately, and you will see that they are numbered. The quadrant number 1, this first quadrant should only contain those activities and responsibilities that require your immediate attention. The space is reserved for emergencies and extremely important deadlines. So if a major crisis arises, you will have to postpone other tasks that you'll find in other quadrants. So examples of things that you may find in quadrant 1 are projects that are deadline-driven, emergencies, last-minute preparations, meetings and appointments, and tasks from quadrant 2 that were postponed. And we'll look at quadrant 2 in a little bit. So what happens if you spend most of your time in quadrant 1? That can lead to a lot of stress, burnout, crisis management. People who spend a lot of time in quadrant 1, they feel like they're putting out fire all the time. So time spent in that quadrant cannot be avoided, but it can be significantly reduced if you're prepared to spend more time in the second quadrant. So that said, when we look at quadrant 2, this quadrant is not only reserved for strategic planning, although it's called long-term strategizing and development, but it will have items related to your health, your education, exercise, and your career. So investing time in these areas might not be urgent today, but in the long term, it will be of great importance. So again, examples of what you can find in quadrant 2: planning, preparing, training, exercising, health-related activities, and recreational things. These tasks are most critical to success, and yet they're commonly the ones that are neglected. These activities, again, not just planning and strategizing, although this is a big one for quadrant 2. The third quadrant, so the things that are urgent and not important. These activities are obstacles that stand in between you and your goals. So what makes items in this quadrant urgent? Most of the time, the urgency is from someone else. So it's either urgent for your manager, urgent for your coworkers, and so on. I was told a proverb once that I really liked, and that really illustrates quadrant 3. Your urgency does not create my priority. So if possible, try and delegate these items or consider rescheduling them. Plenty of people, and if you're one of them, you've gone home in the evening wondering where did time go. If that's how you think every day, at the end of the day, you're probably spending most of your time in the third quadrant. So some examples of activities that fall under this quadrant are interruptions, emails, meetings, pressing matters, again, demands from your manager, demands from your coworkers, things that are urgent to them, not necessarily very urgent to you and not important to you in your achievement of goals. So spending all of your time or a lot of your time in this quadrant can result in short-term focus, seeing goals and plans as worthless, feeling victimized or out of control. And the fourth quadrant, which is the most fun quadrant, is all those activities that do not contribute really little to no value at all. The obvious time wasters. So all the activities contained here are nothing more than just distractions. So these are either you surfing the internet, on Facebook, on YouTube, watching TVs for a long period of time. Spending most of your time in that quadrant doesn't make you productive. It can lead to you being very demotivated and very dependent on others. So when we look at this matrix, most inexperienced people or people who struggle with time management, they tend to spend most of their times in the first and the third quadrant. Most people spend least time of all in box number 2, which is the most critical area for success, for development, and proactive self-determination. So the objective of using the time management matrix is to have you question whether a certain activity brings you closer to your goals or not. So this will allow you to prioritize your tasks. One thing that I do recommend, recreate this matrix, print it out, and anytime you get a task, try and place it. Is it a first priority, something that's urgent and important? Is it a second priority? Is it something that's not urgent today but is important for my success? Is it something that's urgent but not important? Can I delegate it? Can I reschedule it? And then 4, is this something that's just a distraction? So use this as a tool to help you prioritize. I'm going to pause here and see if so far any of you have any questions on setting priorities using the Stephen Covey's time matrix.
No questions have come in yet.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. So I'm going to test everyone and see if you're now somewhat familiar using this time management matrix. I'm going to show you a series of activities. And using the chat box, again, on your right-hand side of your screen, I want you to tell me which quadrant you think each activity belongs into. So the first activity is participating in a training session. Does it belong in quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? So we have a lot of 2s coming in. 1, 4. Perfect. So everyone, almost everyone got it. It is in quadrant number 2. So again, participating in training sessions, this is something that is not urgent today, but it is important for your professional development, or depending on the training, it can also be for your personal development. Same context. The next activity is answering emails. Is this something that goes in quadrant 1, 2, 3, or 4? We're getting a lot of 3s, but we're also getting a lot of 1s. This one's a tricky one. We got it. It depends. So most of you guys are right. Usually, most of our emails will go in quadrant 3. These are things that are urgent to us. These are things that are urgent. Some of them are urgent to us. Most of the time, emails that we receive are urgent for someone else. Most of our emails are not important for our professional and personal development. So again, if this is something that you put in quadrant number 3, filter your emails in the morning. Are there emails that fall in quadrant 1 that you absolutely need to answer right away? Or are these emails that you can set time apart later during the day or in the next couple of days to answer your emails? Perfect. The third activity, setting goals and planning. Which quadrant does this go in? Perfect. That one was a pretty easy one. A lot of you guys are saying quadrant number 2, and you are right. Setting goals and planning. It goes in quadrant number 2. A lot of people skip that and they don't sit down, spend some time to write down what are their goals. Although we do have the My Compass review at the beginning of the year, mid-year, use this time if you're not planning for this more throughout the year to set your goals and plan your next steps and plan your work. Taking a coffee break with a colleague. Which quadrant does this activity fall into? We got a 2, but most of you guys are saying 4. And you're right. So this is an activity that yields little to no value. Yes, we need breaks throughout the day. It is important to take breaks, but this is not something that should be a priority of yours. Last but not least, the last activity that we have here is working on a project that has a deadline due tomorrow. Awesome. You guys are good. Everyone is saying quadrant number 1, and you are right. It goes in quadrant number 1. So it's easy, right? Let's just all print the Stephen Covey time management matrix and we should be all set. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have classes and courses talking about time management. There are other things that goes into managing properly yourself within the time that you have. So this is a great tool for you to use, but it's not easy to use this because we have things in our lives that don't allow us for things to go perfectly, and these are things that we call interruptions. There are 2 types of interruptions that we're going to talk about. There are distractions, and then there are disruptions. Distractions are controlled by you. So these are things you choose to get distracted. So examples of this is surfing the internet, again, Facebook, YouTube, you're controlling these distractions. Interruptions, on the other hand, are out of your control. This is when someone interrupts you, your phone rings, a colleague comes into your office or comes at your desk and asks you a question. This is the difference between distractions and disruptions. Some ways to help you control them. Defer or postpone. That's the first one. Offer to meet up later. Agree to a time and stick to it. For example, if someone shows up at your desk or at your office and starts asking you a question, you can tell them respectfully, I only have 5 minutes, for example. Let's meet up at around 2 p.m. later today or tomorrow, and actually stick to it. Mute your notifications or silence your phone. Let your voicemail screen your calls. I use that a lot. When I'm in meetings or when I'm spending time in quadrant 2 or quadrant 1, will let my voicemail screen my phone calls. And then I'll be able to see which ones I need to answer right away, which ones I can answer later on during the day. Schedule 15 minutes breaks. There are a lot of studies that show that a person's focus can only be maintained for periods of 90 minutes at a time. So schedule 15 minutes throughout the day, take a break, 5-10 minutes, go get a coffee, talk to someone, and come back so that you can focus again on your work. Find a quiet place to work. So around the offices, on all our campuses that I've been to, we all have phone rooms, we all have quiet rooms that we can reserve. So if you are approaching a deadline of a project that you're working on and absolutely need to be working and be productive, leave your desk and go to a quiet place. Another thing that can be a challenge when you're trying to manage our time is procrastination and being disciplined. And this is a challenge that a lot of people face, and I'm one of them. So how do we overcome this? The first tip that I want to give you is do the complex task first. Finish the largest item on your to-do list. This will make you feel extra productive and will give you the boost to do other things that you've been pushing to the side. Attack the hardest task when your energy is fresh and you give yourself the strongest chance to success. Doing otherwise can have, again, a damaging domino effect. So putting off the dreaded item on your list can sap your strength. Break projects into simple and achievable steps. If your complex task is very overwhelming, break it down into smaller tasks. Once you start to enjoy a small accomplishment or two, you're more likely to finish them. Taking a complex task and breaking it into much smaller micro tasks is a great way to track your progress and also to keep quality a top priority for you. The third tip that I want to give you, and it seems obvious, create a to-do list and stick to it, and do one task at a time. List everything, whether it's big, whether it's small. Things that are big, try and break them down into smaller tasks and write them down on your to-do lists. Then you can work through your day, checking off each of the items on your list. You will feel a growing sense of pride once you start seeing your list being checked off one by one. The fourth tip that I have for you is eliminate distractions and temptations. And we previously discussed how to control interruptions. And it's a very important part of controlling procrastination as well. If you know you're the type of person that is going to be watching YouTube videos, for example, block the website. Hide your temptations, hide your phone, silence it. Put your books aside. Motivate yourself and focus on the end goal. Many people claim the reason they procrastinate is because they work best under pressure. And I'm not going to lie, I'm one of these people. So what do you do if your project does not have a deadline? Make up your own. Set a time that you must complete your project by, and give yourself a reward once you've accomplished a couple of tasks or reached the deadline. So you're focusing on the end goal and on what your reward is going to be. This will help you stay on task and work towards your goal. And what I usually do is to combine it with making my intentions public. It's easy to blow things off if your commitment to yourself is the only thing that's at stake. But make yourself accountable to a friend, to a coworker, and suddenly potential embarrassment becomes a very powerful motivator. Just as you're more likely to exercise or go to the gym when you're meeting a friend, you may be more apt to fill out critical paperwork if you have a partner looking over your shoulder, even if it's a virtual coworker. So fear of letting someone down might be the perfect motivator. Colin, do we have any questions so far?
Not specifically on the topic. We've had a number of people asking if we're going to be able to have access to the recording of this presentation afterwards, and yes, we will. It'll be posted on our benefits website, rewards@3ds.com, with all of our other Pathway to Wellness webinars we've hosted. So please take advantage of that site for any of the presentations that we've missed, as well as obviously if you want to go back and review this presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. So this is really high level, the tips and tricks that I wanted to cover with you, with everyone that's on the call. There are many courses that are available on lynda.com that goes into more details on topics of time management. And as a 3DS employees, you all have access to all the content that's on lynda.com. I've researched just by typing time management and found these 3 courses that I think are great. The first one is time management for managers. So how to manage your time effectively as a manager, how to be more productive, how to delegate effectively, how to prioritize your projects, training others, and so on. The second one is time management fundamentals. That's a 3-hour class, 2 hours and 51 minutes, that talks about really fundamentals of time management. It will provide you some tips and tricks, again, to help you through it. And the third one that I found really interesting is time management working from home. A lot of us love working from home because they don't have the interruptions and distractions and they're able to focus. And then there are people like me, for example, who working from home can be a struggle because we're big procrastinators. So this is a great course to how to get time management tips and stay productive and balanced when you're working from home, whether it's part-time or full-time. So this is everything that I was prepared to share with everyone on the webinar today on the topic of time management and setting priorities. We will stay online for the next 5-10 minutes if you have any questions, and we will answer them on the phone. Otherwise, thank you for joining us and have a great afternoon.
Jason, I've got a few items that have come in. One is more of a comment, but any feedback that you may have on this, and that is that specifically working in the office, it seems that many people put their headsets on as sort of an indicator that they're busy.
Yeah.
find that to be an effective tool?
It can definitely be an effective tool, especially since a lot of us do take phone calls and meetings from our desks. So that can be a sign that you are busy doing something and not to be disturbed. So definitely, if this works for you, that's a great tip to have.
And again, you're on the slide with the lynda.com right now. Can you share with everyone again how you access lynda.com?
Absolutely. So if you go on lynda.com, just type in the web address lynda.com, and I will show you this in a little bit.
And while you're bringing that up, I just want to remind everyone, this has come up a few more times, the website where this presentation and all of our Pathway to Wellness webinars are recorded and available is rewards@3ds.com. That's the benefits website where you can find information about all of our benefits, but we also have a section devoted to these Pathway to Wellness webinars.
Perfect. So if you type in www.lynda.com in your webpage and click sign in, not sign up, but sign in, you will be brought to this page here, especially if you are on our VPN or in the office on the network's Wi-Fi. You then click continue because you will be directed to lynda.com by logging in through Dassault Systems. And then you will be brought to our login portal page. Usually it's much faster than this, but let's give it a minute. So I'm already logged in, but usually it will bring you to the same page where you should put your username and password when you're logging in onto the platform. So you use your Dassault Systems trigram or quadrigram and the same password for your 3DS accesses, and you will have access to all the content here on lynda.com. So again, using here the search box, what I did specially for time management is I just typed in time management, and then you have everything that comes up for time management. On your left-hand side, you're able to screen and to filter whether you want to look at videos or courses, and then you're even able to filter which level you want. So you will have videos there and you have access to everything, all the contents on lynda.com. It's a great tool. If you haven't explored it yet, I encourage you to do so.
And some employees are finding it hard to distinguish between distractions and disruptions. Do you have any more tips in this area?
Yeah, so I can go back to the slide here. So again, really the main difference that you need to understand with distractions and disruptions, distractions are things that you choose to get distracted, that are within your control. So this is something that's initiated by you. Disruptions are things that you don't choose to get disrupted. So these are things that happen to you. Someone comes to talk to you, someone calls you, someone sends you a Skype message. These are all disruptions that you did not initiate. So that's the main difference between distractions and disruptions. So any distractions that you can think of yet that you usually initiate, that means you have control over them, and then try to minimize or eliminate them. For example, if you're someone who know that you usually pick up your phone and start texting your family, your friends, maybe hide your phone for a little bit while you're concentrating. If you're someone who surfs the internet, a specific website, for example, maybe blog that website for a little while, especially if you're working on a deadline-driven project. Disruptions, one person on the call gave a good tip for disruptions. Maybe put your headset when you're working on something and you don't want people to come up to you and start talking to you. That's one way of doing things. Another one is go into a quiet room and sit and get some work done. That way you don't get any disruptions, things that you are not able to control. So these are little tips and tricks for distractions and disruptions. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. One other person came up with a comment as well, that they've turned off the notifications on their phone, and that's helped reduce the distractions that they have.
That is a very good tip. If we do not see that little bubble pop up on our phone, we're less likely to pick it up. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, we certainly have gotten a lot of thank yous for your presentation today, Jason. So I also want to add in my thank you. And at this time, we don't really have any additional questions. So we'll end the call. But thank you again today, Jason. And Jason, if you have anything else to add.
No, thank you for everyone who joined in, and I'm very happy to hear that you appreciated this page.
Great. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.